I'm Dr. Tej Khalsa, and you're listening to the Last Breath Podcast. I hope the Last Breath Podcast can be your home for more deeply connecting to your inner being, your higher meaning, and your greater purpose. To our community of listeners, thank you for the love, the constructive feedback, and thank you for sharing stories of your family's experiences listening to the podcast. A listener from the United Kingdom reached out to us through social media and shared that she's pregnant and she's been playing our episodes to her husband, her toddler, and even her unborn baby. We feel deeply moved to be part of what is growing to be an intergenerational conversation in the homes of so many around the world. Thank you for bringing us into your home and including us in the company of your family. It's an honor. Even though I start out these episodes saying thank you, I have to admit that gratitude hasn't always come so naturally to me. I spend most of my mental and emotional energy feeling restless, like something's missing. I'm always wanting some new thing, wanting to rise to some new level of achievement or reach for some new acquisition. And even if I become that thing or earn that thing, the pleasure of it seems short-lived and elusive. The goalpost always moves forward, just out of reach, and I begin the process of wanting and yearning and not feeling like I'm enough all over again. Take, for example, my marriage. If you've ever met us or even seen pictures of my husband and I on social media or on our website, you'll know right away that on the surface we look really different. And unfortunately, on planet Earth, looking really different compared to the majority can give you your own little mountain to climb. We certainly had to climb ours just to secure our wedding day. But what a wonderful wedding day it was. One of the happiest, most grateful days of my life. The words, thank you, thank you, thank you, kind of vibrated like a bell ringing within my chest the whole day. I remember that night as I fell asleep, married. I warned myself, hold on to the gratitude, because your mind always runs off hunting after some new thing. Sure enough, that's what happened. I got married, and even though I married the love of my life, within 2 weeks I started to feel miserable, like there was something missing. It took 7 years, the night I drove to the hospital in a snowstorm, to connect to my higher meaning and free me from that impulse in my marriage. The impulse to always search for the negative. The impulse of fixating on something I thought was missing. Desire is like a monster, always morphing. So that once you lop off one head with your sword and secure one goal, a new head grows back in its place, or maybe even 2 heads, like the goddess Hydra, the many serpentine-headed monster of Greek and Roman mythology. For example, it wasn't enough to be married to the love of my life. He had to be exactly like X. His parents needed to be more like Y. And if my husband couldn't be more like X, and if my in-laws couldn't be more like Y, then I couldn't be happy. Same with my career. It wasn't enough to be a doctor. If I wanted to feel worthwhile, to really distinguish myself, I had to be a researcher too. Same with our stuff. It wasn't enough to have a beautiful, cozy, cottage-style home surrounded by the oak trees and the maples. No. I needed to hustle so that one day, when we finally pay off our mortgage, we can move on and buy acreage, ideally in the woods, hopefully with a swimming pool. Then we'll be happy. Then we'll be able to feel like we've really made it. Such is the delusional power of desire. It controls us, tricks us into thinking we're missing something, or worse yet, lies to us, telling us that we are, within the deepest and most sacred part of us, not enough. That we need to go into the world and hustle and prove our worth. Amass a life of things so that one day we just might be able to hold that stuff up to the world and say to everyone, here, look, I made it. But our mind's negativity bias, our default mode network's tendency to focus on what's wrong, focus on what threatens us, even if it's just our emotional vulnerabilities, that part of us is not likely going to leave us alone. It won't stop chasing desire. It will always keep us on the run. In this episode, I want to share with you something that I've found, something I can mobilize to help dissolve desire. I want to share with you a story of someone who I only got to spend 7 days on earth with, but whose memory still returns from time to time to help me remember again that I am whole and that my life is already full. Her name is Angela. Let me tell you about her. I met Angela during her last few weeks of life. She was the same age as me, a nurse in the same hospital where I was working as a doctor. She was the mother of 2 boys similar to me. I was the mother of 1 little boy at the time. But the resemblance ended there. Angela was dying of cholangiocarcinoma, cancer of the bile ducts, a rare but incredibly aggressive cancer. When I met her in the emergency department, she had just come from a track and field meet where her sweet boys, aged 11 and 7, were competing. In the middle of the track event, Angela had the sudden onset of severe pain in her back and in the large joints of her arms and her legs. She lost the ability to walk. I did a full neurological exam on Angela and admitted her to hospital. I also scanned her spine to make sure that the cancer hadn't spread to her vertebrae and choked off her spinal cord. Thankfully, it hadn't. I arranged for several more tests, one of which was tapping or drawing fluid off of Angela's most painful joint, her swollen left knee, and I also did an MRI of it in case it could help give me a clue into what was going on. I spent the next few days talking with Angela's oncologist, with rheumatology, and also discussing some subtle abnormalities found on her left knee MRI with 3 different radiologists. I spent several days diving deep into the scientific literature, reading case report after case report, stories of people with cholangiocarcinoma and joint pain. I was hoping their stories might help me figure out what was making it difficult for Angela to walk. Every day I would go to see her, and she'd have a shining, smiling face like the sun. She had auburn hair, peachy skin with freckles dancing on the bridge of her nose and the upper heights of her cheeks. She'd tell me she was doing great. The day a walker arrived, she hopped right out of bed and started practicing, her pale hands tightly grabbing hold of the walker's cold stainless steel bars. As she bent over her walker, trying hard to learn to walk again, her lips, always resting in a gentle sunny smile, alternated between opening to laugh or opening to blow strands of orangey red hair out of her eyes. Every day I visited her bedside, we'd close out the checkups with her saying, "Thank you, Tej." And every day I'd leave feeling profoundly guilty, like a failure. I couldn't figure out what was going on in her joints. Why was she having so much difficulty walking? And worst of all, there was nothing I could do to save this woman from the cancer that would inevitably take her life. There was nothing I could do to stop her 2 beautiful sons from losing their mother. I took the whole thing far too personally, like it was my fault and I was a terrible physician. Angela and I got to spend 7 days together. In that time, I felt I got to know her. I also met the whole family, her husband and her 2 sons. At the end of the week, I was moving on to a different hospital to work in the ICU. I walked into her hospital room to say goodbye. She was sitting upright in the hospital bed, the pillows puffed up to support her back, same shining, smiling, freckled face, auburn hair brushed back loosely into a ponytail. She was wearing a light blue hospital gown with a dark blue polka dot pattern on it. The white sheets were pulled up to her waist. Despite the ghostly garb of the sheets, she had a radiant presence, like the sun. If it wasn't for the diagnosis in her hospital chart, you would never have known that this was a woman who only had a couple weeks left to live. I sat down in a gray plastic chair next to her bed, and I told her I'd come to say goodbye. I told her it was an honor and a privilege to be her doctor, that I had spent the week digging into the scientific literature, and that I was very sorry for not being able to figure out why she was having so much difficulty walking. Angela waved away my apology, telling me she was grateful for everything I had done. She asked me where I was headed next. I was finishing up my training at the time, and I explained that I was headed to the ICU. She herself was an ICU nurse, and she said, "Tej, you're great. Some of us ICU nurses sometimes give the women doctors a little bit of a hard time. Don't let them do that to you. You are amazing." I deflected the compliment right back to Angela instead. "You're the amazing one, Angela. You're up every day trying to learn how to walk again with a walker. You're always smiling, and look at you. Even now, you're the one giving me advice." Angela laughed. "Listen, I have to tell you something." "Sure," I said. "The night we met in the emergency department, do you remember that? I turned to my husband after you left. Can you guess what I said to him?" I shook my head. I had no idea. She continued. "I said to him, 'Honey, we've hit the jackpot with her.'" I mumbled something politely in reply and quickly said goodbye and left Angela's room. I had to rush out because of the growing lump in my throat and the hot tears that welled in my eyes. A woman, a 33-year-old woman who was dying. A woman who lost her ability to walk the day she was attending her boys' track meet. A woman who I admitted to hospital to die, had, in spite of it all, turned to her husband on meeting her new doctor and said, "Honey, we've hit the jackpot with her." I never got to fully process the power of Angela's message. Her radical gratitude in the face of death. This was partly because my working life was so incredibly busy at the time. I moved on to the ICU. One night around 2 a.m., while on call, I looked up Angela's file in the computer and saw that the display for her name, her birth date, and all the identifying information on her had changed. It had been switched from a bold font to an italicized font. And in red, bolded letters next to her name, one new word now appeared. Deceased. I opened up the last doctor's note before her death and read about what had happened, how she eventually succumbed to an infection. My pager went off and I had to run off and see a patient. On ICU, people were on the cusp of life or death every day and every night. I didn't think about Angela again for a while. 1 year after the passing of Angela, I was cleaning my son's room. We were now living in southeastern Minnesota. My little one was just a couple months shy of turning 3, and I was finishing up training at a clinic where I now work. I felt tired, and my back hurt a little bit as I bent down to pick up my son's toys. It was a Friday night, and I was feeling sorry for myself. It seems that my mind fluctuates between either being very harsh with myself, seeing everything that's wrong with me, you know it, that negativity bias, that tendency of our wandering mind to trend to the negative, to dwell in the negative. My mind flipped between criticizing me or, on the flip side, pitying me, like I'm some kind of victim. I seemed to perpetually alternate between the two in my head, a pattern of either victimizing myself through my own self-criticism or playing the victim through my own self-pity. Not something I'm thrilled about, but in life and on this podcast, I have to be honest with you, and I have to be honest with myself. Poor me, I thought, as I sighed deeply and picked up the toys off of my son's floor. Working all day at the clinic, only to have to come home to my second shift as a mother, picking up my toddler's toys and cleaning up this mess. That's right. It was Friday night, and inside Dr. Khalsa's mind, the pity party was just getting started. I kept picking up toys. Inside, I was wallowing in my self-pity, like full-on rolling around in it like a tree trunk rolling in mud. Then out of nowhere, a thought crossed my mind. You know, Tej, Angela would love to be alive, cleaning up her son's toys. Angela! I felt a warmth fill my chest, and my thoughts jumped to her as I dropped another plastic toy into one of my son's plastic toy bins. Angela! Yes, Angela! Funny to remember her all of a sudden. Angela. Goodness. She must have passed away this week. It's got to be the anniversary of her passing. I looked around at all the toys covering the carpet of my son's room. Now I felt electrified with excitement. I felt animated by a new kind of energy, an attitude of gratitude that seemed to power my muscles and make them move lightly and with ease. My back pain, the heaviness of my self-pity over my second shift as a mom, it was all gone. I now sprung lightly round the room, and every plastic toy I picked up off the floor and dropped into the plastic toy bins seemed to pulse silently with an ecstatic affirmation of my son's life and of my life. Alive, alive, alive. Fast forward another year, and I was now a faculty member at the clinic where I now work. I had won a research award, but I came home one sunny June day feeling miserable, and once again feeling sorry for myself. I was working 80 hours a week between seeing patients and trying to get my research study off the ground. I had been overworked and pushing myself for months like this, and I was exhausted. The research project itself had months ago started to feel meaningless. I was constantly engaged in endless paperwork for the institutional review board, and the worst part about it was that some of our community partners were mistreating my team members and I. It was a Friday night, and I was brushing my teeth getting ready for bed. I was feeling sorry for myself again. That Friday night pity party in the head of Dr. Khalsa was just getting started. I felt overworked. I was an early career physician trying hard to prove her worth, and I felt like I was failing at it. I looked at myself in the mirror. I heard the giggles of my husband and my 3-year-old from out in the living room. I kept looking into the eyes of my reflection. At least I'm alive, and I have my family. I've hit the jackpot with them, I said to myself in the mirror. A warmth welled up in my chest, and my body flooded with energy from the crown of my head down to the tips of my toes. Angela, I thought. Angela. In my imagination, I thought I could hear the sound of a woman's distant laughter. A gentle smile unfolded on my own lips. I dried my face with a small hand towel and jumped into the hallway, just a few feet from where my husband and my son were wrestling. I love you guys, I exclaimed. I ran up to them and joined in as they were wrestling on my son's playmat. I was 6 months pregnant, so I just stayed to one side, tickling my son and my husband and planting kisses on their cheeks. They wrapped their arms around me. As we pretended to wrestle, I thought of Angela. I wondered how it was possible for her to be remembered year after year on the anniversary of her transition. Maybe one day science will be able to explain all this to us. How it is that people we love can somehow continue to live on inside of us. How is it that from time to time they can surface in a way that feels as if their presence is right there with us? How is it that their legacy can remain even after they're gone, helping us continue to learn and grow? For now, it remains a beautiful mystery to me. There's that Joni Mitchell song, Big Yellow Taxi. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. When Joni Mitchell wrote that song, she was singing about people like me. People so caught up in the negative and taking the good they have for granted that they don't notice all they've got till it's gone. Even if paradise is the person or the place right in front of them, they won't even see it. But Angela was different. She had radical gratitude. In the face of losing the ability to walk, in the face of being forced to go to the emergency room, being forced to be admitted to hospital, knowing she was moving closer and closer to her last breath. She turned around to her husband after they met their new doctor and said, "Honey, we've hit the jackpot with her." Angela had more than an attitude of gratitude. She had radical gratitude. She had the power to look on her circumstances and not be reduced by them. She had the power to feel like she was winning, that she had hit the jackpot, even when she was facing death. Human beings like her are rare and a great gift to the world. Her legacy, when I take time to remember it, connects me to my own gratitude for life. And the more I practice gratitude, the better I can get at it too. Getting intentional and connecting to my gratitude has the power to transform me from being an overworked mom, feeling sorry for myself as I start my second shift at home, to being someone who feels lucky to even be alive. When I clean my house, when I pick up toys, the experience pulsates with life. Alive, alive, alive. These boys are alive. I am alive. When I pick up my husband's socks, he leaves them everywhere in the house, people. The socks seem to say, alive, alive, alive. And I think, thank goodness my husband is alive. Thank goodness we are all alive and we get this chance to be together. I hope my husband always leaves his socks on the living room floor, because one day, the day those socks aren't there, that's going to be a really hard day. I had a very successful lawyer come to see me. He has a beautiful heart, but a powerfully negative mind. That hypervigilant, negative mind makes him a really good lawyer, but it also isolates him and makes him miserable. He told me he's so negative, he thinks it's the reason he has very few friends. He also told me that he makes a lot of money, but he can't stand his job and feels trapped. I talked to him about the importance of gratitude. He listened very politely and then said to me, "I don't understand, doctor. Are you telling me to just be grateful for my life?" He said it incredulously, like he was thinking, this lady is trying to get me to just force myself to pretend I'm happy with the status quo, to take what feels like a meaningless job and just kind of force myself to swallow that and pretend to be happy about it, to look out at the world, to listen to the news every night and just put my hands over my ears and shut my eyes and be like, la, 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 gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. He had a point. I had to explain myself further. I know what you're concerned about, and you have every right to feel that way. We can't just use gratitude to force ourselves to accept the unacceptable. We can't use gratitude to just sit where we are and keep our heads down and force ourselves to swallow stuff that feels meaningless or is morally wrong. Like my patients who are in abusive relationships or in a job where they're being harassed. I don't want them practicing gratitude for their abuser. No way. But at the same time, I told him, we can't push gratitude into the future either, because it'll never come. Like, oh, when I get a more meaningful job or I'm making a difference to society, then I'll feel grateful. Tomorrow has a habit of never showing up. But today is here and now. Today is where we will always have an opportunity to exercise our power. And gratitude is a form of power. We can feel grateful today, not for the meaningless job, but we can feel grateful that we have the wisdom to know it's meaningless to us, and be grateful to know we long for something more, and feel grateful that we can use our creativity to start envisioning and planning for the next steps that might help us move towards something more meaningful. And in the meantime, while we're still in our current job, we can find something in it to be grateful for, like how it provides for our family. And we can be grateful for our family, these beautiful people who've committed to sharing their lives with us. And more than anything, we can feel grateful to be alive, to have this chance, to be here now. On this podcast, we're trying to encourage you to start your own last breath practice, to take time, meaningful time, to get more intentional with your life. We're hoping you'll schedule relaxation time before bed to reflect on your day as if it were your last day on earth, and to ask yourself the question, when I take my last breath, how do I want to feel? One night after the babies were asleep in bed, I sat down to do my evening last breath practice. I asked myself, if this were my last day on earth, how do I feel? It occurred to me that I felt pretty good about the day, actually. Everything had gone smoothly at work. Everything had gone smoothly at home. My boys fell asleep knowing they were loved. I felt at peace with everything. There was just one thing missing. In meditating, I realized that I had forgotten to tell my husband that I loved him. In fact, come to think of it, I had come home from work and sort of bypassed him completely and not given him any energy. I had only focused on our kids. And so I got up off the mat and went downstairs to where my hubby was sitting. "Everything okay, sweetie?" he asked me. "Nothing's wrong, honey," I said, picking up his hand and massaging it. "I just realized I never said I love you today, and I needed to say it before I fell asleep." "Aw, that's nice of you, sweetie, but I have to say that massage sure feels great." The massage. My husband is a percussionist. He has really muscular hands and arms. When he voiced appreciation for the massage, it occurred to me that I hadn't massaged his hands in more than 10 years. In fact, sitting there, it dawned on me that the last time I gave his hands a massage was Christmas 2006, while we were still dating. I had met my partner's parents for the first time that Christmas, and the wise soul that would eventually become my father-in-law saw me massaging Siri-chan's hands and said to us, "All these little expressions of love, if you keep them up, your relationship will stay strong. But let them go, and sooner or later cracks form. And those cracks can create chasms. And you can run the risk of one day waking up and realizing you have grown so far apart that there's nothing left to keep you together. So keep doing all these little things. Show your gratitude for one another." I remember at the time having only known my partner 6 months, and I was in love with him. I listened respectfully to his father, but dismissed his words. I thought to myself, that's never going to happen. I love Siri-chan. I'm going to massage his hands forever. Forever lasted for the duration of Christmas 2006 up to maybe New Year's. And then a gap. Here I was, more than 10 years later, 2 children later, finally holding his hand again and massaging it. I hope your last breath practice gives you what it's given me, the opportunity to appreciate all that you already have and nurture it. I hope it gives you an opportunity to connect to the most noble, regal part of you. You can connect to your own nobility, that natural part of your inheritance that exists in your brain within your focus mode network. One of the ways to connect to your own nobility is just by practicing gratitude, authentic gratitude. As you feel it and fill yourself up with it. I hope you'll notice how your desires dissolve and your eyes open to all the dreams that have already come true for you. I hope you'll be able to feel all the ways in which you've already hit the jackpot. I also hope in listening to today's episode, I hope you'll start to take the time, not just during your last breath practice, but take time first thing in the morning. Take time when you get home from work to pause and pay more attention to the people you love and are grateful for. And guess what? If you don't live with anyone, there's still one person you live with that you can always love, always honor, and always be grateful for. Yourself. As you practice gratitude, make it part of your daily routine, and you'll get even better at it. Let gratitude connect you to that part of you that is royalty, that does not react to circumstance, but is instead rooted in something much bigger. Breathe into your gratitude. Let it take you to that horizon where you can't help but feel like you've hit the jackpot. I'm Dr. Tej Khalsa. Thank you for joining me on the Last Breath podcast.
The Last Breath podcast is written by Dr. Tej K Khalsa, an assistant professor of medicine at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. The views and beliefs discussed in this podcast are Dr. Khalsa's own personal views and do not represent the views of her employer. The Last Breath podcast is produced by Tej K Khalsa for the audio division of Lighthouse Consultants. The music in this podcast is written by Dr. Khalsa and is featured on the album Freedom by Optar. By listening to the podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. For more information on the Last Breath podcast, visit www.thelastbreathpodcast.com.